I took the job, no nanny survived, and even my billionaire boss couldn't save me. My name is Elisa, and I want you to know that when I walked through those massive iron gates for the first time, I had no idea I was about to enter a war zone disguised as paradise. The Biltmore estate in the Hamptons stretched out before me like something from a movie. 47 rooms, manicured gardens that probably cost more than most people's houses, and a view of the Atlantic Ocean that took my breath away. The October wind was sharp against my face, carrying the smell of salt water and expensive roses. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. I was the 16th nanny they'd hired in 18 months. Miss Rivera? The voice belonged to Mrs. Henderson, the estate manager. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Mr. Ashford is waiting for you in his office. As we walked through marble hallways lined with paintings that probably belonged in museums, I tried to calm my racing heart. I needed this job. My bank account had exactly $47. My studio apartment in Queens was 3 weeks behind on rent, and my mother's medical bills were piling up faster than I could count them. The rejection letters from other families still burned in my memory. We need someone with a degree in child development. Your references aren't quite what we're looking for. We've decided to go with someone more experienced. But desperate times make you brave in ways you never imagined. Marcus Ashford's office was bigger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the estate's private beach. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from ice. Tall, sharp jawline, dark hair perfectly styled, and eyes the color of a winter storm. He was 34 years old and worth more money than some small countries. Miss Rivera, he didn't look up from his laptop. Sit. I sat in the leather chair across from him, my worn coat feeling suddenly shabby in this palace of wealth. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Finally, he closed the laptop and looked at me. Those gray eyes seemed to see right through me, cataloging every flaw, every weakness. You have no formal education in childcare, he said. It wasn't a question. No, sir, no experience with children from affluent families. No, sir, your only reference is from a diner in Queens, where you worked as a waitress. Heat rose in my cheeks. Yes, sir, he leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. 15 nannies have quit this job. The longest any of them lasted was 9 days. Most don't make it past 3. Do you know why? I shook my head. My children. His voice dropped to something that might have been pain, but his expression never changed. Emma, Sophie, and Michael. They're 6 years old, triplet, and they have decided that they don't want anyone taking care of them, except, he paused, except their mother, who died 2 years ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of my own father, who died when I was 7, leaving me and my mother to figure out how to breathe in a world that suddenly didn't make sense. I'm sorry, I whispered. Something flickered across his face, gone so fast I might have imagined it. I don't need sympathy, Miss Rivera. I need someone who won't run away when a 6-year-old throws a plate of food at their head. Someone who won't quit when they find their bedroom door glued shut. Someone who can handle being called terrible names by children who are drowning in grief they don't understand. I thought about the eviction notice taped to my door, about my mother's medication that cost more than I made in a month, about all the jobs I'd been turned down for because I wasn't good enough, smart enough, qualified enough. I won't run away, I said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. They all say that. I'm not them. What makes you so special? The question hung in the air between us. What did make me special? I had no degree, no training, no impressive background. I was just a 24-year-old woman from Queens who'd been cleaning tables and dodging bill collectors for the past year. But I thought about the kids who used to come into the diner with their parents, how I'd always end up talking to them while their parents argued or ignored them, how something in me just naturally wanted to make them smile, to make them feel heard. I don't know if I'm special, I said finally, but I know what it feels like to lose someone who was your whole world, and I know what it's like to be angry about it. For the first time since I'd walked into his office, Marcus Ashford really looked at me. Not through me, not around me, but at me. The salary is $8,000 a month, he said. Live-in position, you'll have your own wing of the house. If you last a month, there's a bonus. If you last 6 months, He paused. Well, no one's lasted 6 months. $8,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. When do I start? Now. As Mrs. Henderson led me through the house to meet the children, she spoke in low, hurried tones. The children are difficult, she said, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Since Mrs. Ashford's accident, they've been, well, you'll see. They loved their mother very much. She was the only one who could manage them. We stopped outside a set of double doors painted soft blue. From inside came the sound of what could only be described as controlled chaos. Shouting, something crashing, and underneath it all, the sound that broke my heart. A child crying. Master Michael is the quietest, Mrs. Henderson continued. He barely speaks anymore. Miss Emma is the leader, brilliant, but ruthless. And Miss Sophie, she sighed. Sophie is the wild card. You never know what she's going to do next. She opened the doors, and I stepped into a playroom that looked like a battlefield. Toys were scattered everywhere, some clearly broken. Finger paint covered one wall in angry red streaks. In the center of the chaos stood a little girl with dark curls and fierce green eyes that were exactly like her father's. She held a wooden block in her hand like a weapon. Go away, Emma shouted at me. We don't want another stupid nanny. To her left, Sophie was sitting in a corner, her blonde hair a mess, methodically tearing pages out of what looked like an expensive book. She looked up at me with the coldest stare I'd ever seen from a 6-year-old. And in the far corner, almost hidden behind an overturned chair, was Mike, dark hair like his father's. But where Marcus's eyes were sharp and cold, Michael's were huge and filled with so much sadness it took my breath away. He wasn't crying anymore, but his cheeks were still wet. Mrs. Henderson stepped back. I'll leave you to get acquainted, she said, and I heard the relief in her voice as she closed the doors behind me. For a moment, nobody moved. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me with a mixture of defiance, suspicion, and hurt, so deep it made my chest ache. I looked around the destroyed playroom and did the one thing no adult had probably done in this house for a very long time. I sat down on the floor. Wow, I said, looking around at the chaos. You guys are really good at making messes. Emma's grip on the wooden block tightened. Are you making fun of us? No, I said simply. I'm impressed. This level of destruction takes real skill. Sophie stopped tearing pages and tilted her head at me like a curious cat. The last nanny cried when she saw our playroom, Emma said, but there was less anger in her voice now, more curiosity. Did she? That seems like a waste of time. Crying doesn't clean up messes. Are you going to make us clean it up? This was the first thing Sophie had said, and her voice was surprisingly soft. Probably eventually, but right now, I'm more interested in meeting you. I'm Elisa. We know who you are, Emma said. You're babysitter number 16. Nanny, I corrected gently. And I prefer to think of myself as babysitter number 1. The other 15 were just practice rounds. Despite herself, Emma's mouth twitched like she was fighting a smile. Michael hadn't moved from his corner, but I could feel him watching me. I turned to look at him directly. Hi, Michael, I said softly. He blinked once but didn't respond. That's okay, I told him. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm just happy to meet you. He doesn't talk anymore, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Not since Mommy died. The words hit the room like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples of pain across all 3 little faces. I'm sorry about your mom, I said quietly. Losing someone you love is the hardest thing in the world. Did your mommy die too? Sophie asked. No, but my daddy did when I was 7. A little older than you, but not much. Emma's defenses cracked, just a tiny bit. Did it hurt? Yes, it hurt so much. I thought I might die too. For a long time, I was angry at everyone and everything. I broke things. I yelled. I was mean to people who were trying to help me. All 3 children were completely still now, listening. But you know what I learned? I continued. Being angry didn't bring my daddy back, and being mean to people who cared about me just made me lonely. We don't want another mommy, Emma said fiercely. We just want our real mommy back. I know, I said. I'm not here to be your mommy. I'm just here to take care of you while your daddy works. Maybe we can be friends. Friends don't get paid $8,000 a month, Sophie said, with startling wisdom. I laughed. You're right. But maybe we can start as friendly roommates. Over the next few hours, I learned what the previous 15 nannies had endured. The children were like tiny generals commanding an army of rebellion. They'd superglued door handles, filled shampoo bottles with honey, and once managed to lock a nanny in the garden shed for 3 hours. But underneath all that mischief, I saw something else. I saw 3 children who missed their mother so desperately they'd turned themselves into fortresses, keeping everyone out rather than risk loving someone who might leave them too. That first night, as I was settling into my new room, a suite bigger than any place I'd ever lived, I heard crying coming from down the hall, soft, muffled sobs that seemed to echo through the vast emptiness of the house. I followed the sound to Michael's room. His door was cracked open, and inside I could see him curled up in a bed that looked enormous around his small frame. In his arms was a stuffed elephant, worn from years of love. I knocked gently on the doorframe. Michael, are you okay? The crying stopped, but he didn't answer. Can I come in? Still nothing. But he didn't tell me to go away either. I stepped into the room and sat on the edge of his bed. His room was perfect. Expensive furniture, toys that most kids could only dream of. Walls painted with a beautiful mural of a jungle scene. But it felt cold, like a display in a store rather than a child's sanctuary. That's a beautiful elephant, I said softly. Michael clutched it tighter. I had a stuffed bear when I was little. His name was Mr. Chocolate because he was brown and I loved chocolate. I used to tell him all my secrets. Slowly, Michael turned to look at me. His eyes were red from crying, and my heart broke a little more. What's your elephant's name? I asked. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, he whispered, Peanut. Peanut is a great name. Did your mom give him to you? He nodded, and fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. She must have loved you very much to give you such a special friend. She said Peanut would protect me when she couldn't, he whispered. I felt my own eyes fill with tears, but I blinked them back. These children needed strength, not more sadness. Your mom sounds like she was very smart. Peanut is doing a good job taking care of you. But I miss her, he said, and the pain in his small voice was almost unbearable. I know, sweetheart. I know. I sat with him until he fell asleep. And as I watched his peaceful face in the moonlight streaming through his window, I made a promise. Not to replace his mother. That was impossible. But to be someone he could count on. Someone who wouldn't leave. The next morning brought my first real test. I woke up to the sound of screaming. Not playful screaming, the kind of screaming that meant someone was in real trouble. I ran down the hall in my pajamas and found chaos in the kitchen. Emma was standing on the marble counter, reaching for something on a high shelf. Sophie was below her, trying to climb up to help. And Michael was crying in the corner, holding Peanut. What's happening? I called out. We want cereal, Emma shouted without turning around. The stupid kitchen lady won't give us cereal. Miss Emma, please get down. Mrs. Patterson, the cook, was wringing her hands. Mr. Ashford left specific instructions about their breakfast. I don't care about Daddy's stupid instructions. Emma reached further, the shelf wobbling dangerously. My heart stopped. She was going to fall. Without thinking, I ran forward and caught Emma just as she lost her balance. She fought against me, small fists pounding my shoulders. Let me go. Let me go. Emma, stop, I said firmly but gently, holding her secure. You could have been hurt. I don't care. Well, I do. Something in my tone made her pause. She looked at me with those fierce green eyes, breathing hard. Why? She demanded. Because you matter. Because you're important. Because someone needs to care about whether you get hurt. And right now that someone is me. Slowly, Emma stopped fighting. I set her down gently, then knelt to her level. What kind of cereal do you want? Lucky Charms, Sophie said. Immediately. We're not allowed, Emma said, but there was less fire in her voice now. Says who? Daddy says we can only have healthy cereal. And fruits. And vegetables. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. I looked at Mrs. Patterson, who nodded grimly. Mr. Ashford is very strict about their nutrition. I thought about Marcus Ashford in his perfect suit, probably sitting in some boardroom, making decisions worth millions of dollars, while his children fought over cereal in a kitchen that felt more like a museum than a place where a family lived. Miss Taterson, I said, do we have Lucky Charms somewhere in this house? She looked scandalized. Absolutely not. Do we have any cereal that isn't cardboard disguised as food? A tiny smile played at the corners of her mouth. There might be some Honey Nut Cheerios hidden in the pantry. Perfect. Emma, Sophie, Michael. Today we're having Honey Nut Cheerios. And if your dad asks, you can tell him it was my idea. You're going to get in trouble, Sophie said. But she was smiling now. Probably. But some troubles are worth it. As I watched 3 6-year-olds eat cereal with the kind of joy most kids reserve for Christmas morning, I realized something. These weren't bad children. They were lost children. And somewhere in this enormous house filled with everything money could buy, they were starving for the one thing money couldn't purchase: someone who would put them first. The confrontation with Marcus came that afternoon. I was reading to the children in the library when he appeared in the doorway like a storm cloud. His suit was perfect, his hair perfect, his expression perfectly controlled. But I was learning to read the subtle signs of his anger. The slight tightening around his eyes, the way his hands clenched just a fraction. Miss Rivera. A word. The children immediately tensed. Emma moved closer to me. Sophie grabbed my hand, and Michael clutched Peanut tight. I'll be right back, I told them softly. Marcus led me to his office and closed the door with more force than necessary. I have one rule in this house, he said without preamble. My children eat healthy food, not sugar masquerading as nutrition. They're 6 years old, I said calmly. A little cereal isn't going to hurt them. That's not your decision to make. You're right, it's yours. But when was the last time you sat down and ate breakfast with them? The question hit its mark. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, pain, maybe both. I work 16 hours a day to provide for this family. I'm not questioning your work ethic, Mr. Ashford. I'm asking when you last saw your children smile. They smile. When? At dinner? Oh wait, Mrs. Patterson told me you eat in your office most nights. At bedtime? No, that's my job now. So when exactly do you see them happy? His jaw clenched. Miss Rivera, you have been in this house for exactly 18 hours. Don't presume to lecture me about my children. Someone needs to. The words were out before I could stop them. We stared at each other across his massive desk, and I waited for him to fire me on the spot. Instead, he sat down heavily in his chair and put his head in his hands. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. She was everything to them. She knew exactly what they needed, when they needed it. I'm good at business, at making money, at solving problems that have logical solutions. But my children, he looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw past the ice to the exhausted, grieving man. My children look at me like I'm a stranger. My anger melted away. They're scared, I said softly. They lost their mom, and now they're afraid of losing you too. So they push everyone away first, including me, especially you, because you're the one who matters most. He was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, less armor, more human. What would you suggest? Have breakfast with them tomorrow. Not in your office, not between phone calls. Sit at the kitchen table and eat cereal with your children. I have a conference call at 7. Reschedule it. He looked at me like I'd suggested he set fire to his money. Miss Rivera, I can't just. Yes, you can. You're Marcus Ashford. You own half the companies on the East Coast. If you can't reschedule one phone call to eat breakfast with your children, then money isn't the only thing you've lost. For a moment, I thought he was going to explode. His face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on something that might have been respect. You have exactly 1 month to prove this approach works, he said finally. If my children aren't happier, if their behavior doesn't improve, if you can't succeed where 15 others have failed, you're gone. Fair enough. As I turned to leave, he called my name. Miss Rivera. Yes. Why are you really here? And don't tell me it's because you love children. You could work anywhere. I thought about lying, about making up some noble reason that would make me sound better. But these children had been lied to enough. By circumstances, by life, by adults who promised to care, and then disappeared. Because I need the money, I said honestly. Because I'm desperate. Because this job was my last chance at not ending up homeless. He studied my face for a long moment. At least you're honest. Honesty is about all I have left. That night, I learned what the previous nannies had really faced. I was woken up at 2 in the morning by the sound of my bedroom door slamming shut. When I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. They'd somehow barricaded it from the outside. Instead of panicking, I sat on my bed and called out, "Nice work, guys. Very creative." Silence. I'm impressed. The last nanny probably would have been crying by now. "Are you going to call Daddy?" Emma's voice came from the other side of the door. "Nope." "Are you going to quit?" That was Sophie. "Nope." "Then what are you going to do?" Emma. Again. "I'm going to wait. I figure you'll get bored eventually and let me out. You'll fall asleep and I'll find another way out in the morning. Either way, I'm not going anywhere." More silence. Then whispering. I couldn't quite make out. "Why aren't you mad?" Sophie called out. "Because you're not trying to be mean," I said. "You're trying to protect yourself. You think if you're difficult enough, I'll leave like everyone else did. Then you won't have to worry about caring about me and losing me too." The whispering stopped completely. "But here's the thing," I continued. "I made a promise to myself. And to you. Even if you don't want to hear it, I'm not leaving. You can barricade my door every night for a month, and I still won't leave. You can put salt in my coffee and paint on my clothes and hide my shoes, and I still won't leave. You know why?" "Why?" Michael's voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to be angry and scared and alone. And I know that underneath all that anger, you're just 3 kids who miss their mom and wish the world made sense again." There was a long pause. Then I heard the sound of furniture being moved. The door opened, and 3 small figures stood in the hallway in their pajamas. Emma's fierce expression had cracked just enough to show the vulnerability underneath. Sophie was chewing on her lip, a nervous habit I was already learning to recognize. And Michael was clutching Peanut, his dark eyes wide and uncertain. "We're sorry," Emma said quietly. "No, you're not," I said with a smile. "And that's okay. But maybe we can make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You can test me all you want. Play pranks, make messes, see how far you can push me. But in return, you have to give me a chance to show you that I'm different, that I'm not going anywhere." Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long do we get to test you?" I pretended to think about it. 2 weeks. But no one gets hurt, and nothing gets permanently broken. Deal. Emma looked at her siblings. Sophie nodded eagerly. Michael gave the tiniest nod. "Deal," Emma said, and for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. The next 2 weeks were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The children tested me in ways that were creative, exhausting, and sometimes genuinely impressive. They short-sheeted my bed, replaced my shampoo with maple syrup, and somehow managed to fill my room with balloons while I was sleeping. But with each prank, something interesting happened. They started staying around afterward to see my reaction. When I laughed at finding my shoes filled with jello, Sophie giggled. When I complimented Emma on the engineering required to balance a bucket of water over my door, she beamed with pride. When Michael saw me calmly cleaning syrup out of my hair, he offered me his own towel. Slowly, carefully, we were building something that looked like trust. Marcus kept his distance, which I was learning was his way of dealing with anything that made him uncomfortable. But I caught him watching sometimes, lurking in doorways when I was playing with the children, lingering in the hall when I was reading them bedtime stories. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late October. The children and I were in the playroom, which was now clean and organized, a project we'd tackled together over several days. Emma was showing me a painting she'd made. Sophie was building an elaborate tower with blocks, and Michael was sitting quietly with Peanut, but he was sitting close to me now, which felt like a victory. That's when we heard it, a crash from somewhere in the house, followed by raised voices. The children froze. Daddy's mad, Sophie whispered. He's always mad, Emma said, but I could hear the fear under her bravado. Michael scooted even closer to me. Through the open door, I could hear Marcus's voice echoing through the hallway. He was on the phone with someone, and he was furious. I don't care what the board thinks. This is a billion-dollar merger, and if they can't see the value, then they're idiots. Something else crashed. Emma's face had gone pale. He's going to break things again. Again, I looked at her carefully. Sometimes when Daddy gets really mad about work, he throws things. He broke Mom's favorite vase last month. Emma's voice was small now, all her fierceness gone. My heart clenched. These children had lost their mother, and now they had to watch their father fall apart too. Stay here, I told them firmly. I'll be right back. Elisa, no. Sophie grabbed my arm. Daddy doesn't like to be bothered when he's mad. He might yell at you, Emma added, but there was something that looked like hope in her eyes. I squeezed Sophie's hand. Sometimes adults need someone to remind them that they're not alone either. I found Marcus in his office, standing among the wreckage of what had once been expensive-looking glass sculpture. His tie was loosened, his perfect hair messed up, and his hands were shaking. Mr. Ashford? He spun around, his face a mask of fury that faltered when he saw me. Miss Rivera. He looked around at the broken glass, and something that might have been shame crossed his features. I'll have this cleaned up. Are you hurt? The question seemed to surprise him. What? Your hands. Are you hurt? He looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. There was a small cut on his knuckle, a thin line of blood. It's nothing. Let me see. Miss Rivera. I don't need. Your children are terrified, I said quietly. They're in the playroom right now, afraid that their father is falling apart just like everything else in their world. The fight went out of him all at once. His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked less like a powerful billionaire and more like a man drowning in grief and responsibility he never asked for. I can't do this, he said quietly. I can't be what they need. Catherine, she was the heart of this family. I was just the provider. And now you have to be both. I don't know how. I stepped closer, careful not to startle him. Can I tell you what I see when I look at your children? He nodded. I see 3 kids who are brilliant and creative and strong. I see Emma, who's a natural leader, but thinks she has to be tough all the time because she's afraid of being vulnerable. I see Sophie, who's got the biggest heart in the world, but hides it behind mischief because she's scared of getting hurt. And I see Michael, who feels everything so deeply that sometimes the only way he can cope is by going quiet. Marcus was listening intently now, but most of all, I continued, I see 3 children who love their father desperately and are terrified that they're losing him too. I'm not going anywhere, but are you here? Really here? He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. We both knew the answer. I don't know how to be what they need, he said again. Start small. Have breakfast with them. Ask about their day. Tuck them in at night. You don't have to be perfect, Mr. Ashford. You just have to be present. And if I fail, then you try again tomorrow. The next morning, something miraculous happened. Marcus Ashford, billionaire CEO, sat at the kitchen table in a casual sweater instead of a suit, eating Honey Nut Cheerios with his children. The kids were so shocked they barely spoke at first. But gradually, as their father asked questions about their toys and listened to Sophie's elaborate story about a dream she'd had, they began to relax. Daddy, Emma said carefully, Elisa taught us how to make paper airplanes yesterday. Did she? Marcus looked at me with something that might have been gratitude. Are you good at it? I'm terrible, I admitted, but the kids are natural engineers. Maybe you can show me later, he said to Emma, and her whole face lit up. It was a small moment, but in a house that had been suffocating under the weight of grief and silence, it felt like a revolution. Over the following weeks, I watched a family slowly begin to heal. Marcus started coming home for dinner. He moved his home office closer to the children's playroom so he could hear their laughter while he worked. He learned to braid Sophie's hair and helped Emma with increasingly complex art projects. And slowly, carefully, Michael began to speak again, first to Peanut, then to me, and finally, beautifully, to his father. But the real change was in me too. I'd taken this job out of desperation, thinking I'd endure whatever I had to for the money. But somewhere between Emma's fierce hugs and Sophie's infectious giggle, and Michael's quiet hand slipping into mine, I'd fallen in love with these children, and if I was being honest with myself, I was falling for their father too. Marcus was nothing like the cold, distant man I'd first met. When he thought no one was watching, I saw him smile at his children's artwork. I saw him pause outside their rooms at night, just listening to them breathe. I saw him carry each of them to bed when they fell asleep during movie night, his face soft with a love so fierce it took my breath away. But I also saw how he watched me with the children, and I began to understand that my presence in their lives was changing him too. The crisis came 6 weeks into my employment, on a gray December afternoon that felt heavy with approaching snow. I was in the garden with the children, bundled up in coats and scarves, when Sophie suddenly stopped running and pointed toward the house. "Who's that lady talking to Daddy?" Through the tall windows of Marcus's office, I could see him in heated conversation with a woman I'd never seen before. She was elegant in the way that only comes with serious money. Perfectly styled blonde hair, a coat that probably cost more than my car, and the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to getting her way. "That's Aunt Victoria," Emma said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Fear. "Mommy's sister," Sophie added quietly. My stomach dropped. Catherine's sister. I'd heard about her from Miss Henderson, a society woman from Boston, who'd been making noise about the children's living situation since Catherine's death. "Why is she here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "She wants to take us away," Michael said in a voice so small it was almost lost in the wind. "What do you mean?" "She says Daddy can't take care of us properly," Emma explained, her fierce protectiveness back in full force. "She says we need a real family." "But we are a real family," Sophie said, confused. "Not according to Aunt Victoria." I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. "How do you know this?" "We heard her talking to Daddy on the phone last week," Emma said. "She's been calling lawyers." Through the window, I could see the conversation getting more heated. Victoria was gesturing emphatically, and Marcus's shoulders were rigid with tension. "Come on," I said, taking Sophie's hand. "Let's go inside." As we walked back toward the house, my mind was racing. I'd heard about custody battles, about relatives who swooped in when they thought children weren't being properly cared for, the previous nannies quitting, the chaos in the house, 3 children acting out their grief. It would be easy for someone to paint a picture of neglect. We were hanging up our coats in the mudroom when the office door opened, and voices carried into the hallway. "Marcus, be reasonable," Victoria was saying. "These children need stability. They need structure. They need a mother figure who isn't some temporary employee." "They have what they need," Marcus replied, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "Do they? How many nannies have quit? How many times have your children been left with staff because you can't maintain proper child care? That's different now." "Is this latest girl, what's her name?" "Elisa. She has no qualifications, no education, no background. Is that really the influence you want in your children's lives?" My cheeks burned. Every word was true, but hearing it said out loud made me feel small and inadequate all over again. "She's been good for them," Marcus said, and something warm bloomed in my chest. "Good for them?" "Marcus, I've seen the reports from their school. Emma got into 3 fights last month. Sophie was caught stealing art supplies. And Michael." She paused dramatically. "Michael hasn't spoken to his teacher in weeks. These children are falling apart, and you're too busy building your empire to notice." "That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you attended a parent-teacher conference? When did you last check their homework? You're raising 3 future delinquents, and this waitress you've hired isn't going to fix that." I'd heard enough. The children were pressed against me now, Emma's face flushed with anger, Sophie's eyes filling with tears, and Michael trembling. I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Excuse me." Both adults turned. Victoria looked me up and down, with barely concealed disdain. Marcus's expression was unreadable. I couldn't help overhearing. And I think there are some things you should know about these children. Victoria's eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon. Emma hasn't been in any fights at school. She's been defending a boy in her class who was being bullied. When I called her teacher yesterday, she said Emma was showing real leadership qualities. Victoria's confident expression flickered. Sophie wasn't stealing art supplies. She was taking extras home to make Christmas presents for the staff because she wanted to do something nice for the people who take care of their house. How do you? And Michael. I looked directly at Victoria. Michael talks to his teacher every day now. She says he's one of the most thoughtful children she's ever had in her class. He just needed someone to listen to him first. The hallway fell silent, except for the sound of wind against the windows. These children aren't falling apart, I continued. They're grieving. They're scared, but they're also strong and kind, and incredibly loved. And yes, I'm just a waitress from Queens, with no fancy degree. But I know what it looks like when children feel safe. And I know what it looks like when they don't. These children feel safe here, with their father, with me, with this family they're building together. Victoria's face had gone cold. Mr. Ashford, I think we should discuss this privately. No. The voice came from behind me. Emma stepped forward, her small chin raised in defiance. We want to hear what you're saying about us. Emma, Marcus started. We're not babies, she said firmly. This is about us. We should get to listen. Sophie moved to stand beside her sister. We want Elisa to stay. And then, in the smallest voice imaginable, Michael said, Please don't take us away from Daddy. Victoria's composure cracked. Children, you don't understand. We understand that Mommy died, Emma said. We understand that it made everyone sad, but Daddy's not sad all the time anymore. And we're not sad all the time anymore either. Not since Elisa came. Elisa makes Daddy smile, Sophie added. Real smiles, not work smiles. Marcus was staring at his children like he was seeing them for the first time. And Daddy tucks us in now, Michael said, his voice getting stronger. And he eats breakfast with us. And he helped me build a fort last weekend. A fort. Victoria looked confused. Out of couch cushions. Marcus said quietly. It was actually quite impressive. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Victoria looked around at all of us, at Marcus's softened expression, at the children's united front, at me standing in the middle of it all, in my sweater, from Target, and jeans, with a small paint stain from that morning's art project. This is ridiculous, she said finally. Marcus, these children need proper guidance. Structure, rules. They have rules, I said, and structure, and guidance. What they don't have is someone trying to turn them into perfect little robots. I am trying to help this family, by breaking it apart, by saving it from disaster. From what disaster? Marcus's voice was sharp now. Victoria, my children are happy. For the first time since Catherine died, they're happy. They're sleeping through the night. They're excited about school. Emma hasn't had a single behavioral issue in a month. Sophie is making friends. And Michael. He looked at his son with such love it made my throat tight. Michael laughs now. Because of her, Victoria said, pointing at me like I was something distasteful. Yes, Marcus said simply. Because of her. The admission hung in the air between us all. Victoria's expression shifted, becoming calculating. I see what's happening here. This isn't about the children at all, is it? This is about you and your little employee. My face burned. But before I could respond, Emma stepped forward. What's wrong with you? She asked. Victoria with 6-year-old directness. Elisa takes care of us. She reads to us and plays with us, and makes us feel better when we're sad. Daddy works hard to take care of us too. Why do you want to make everything bad again? Emma, that's enough, Marcus said. But his voice was gentle. No, Daddy. It's not enough. Emma looked at Victoria with those fierce green eyes. You don't even live here. You don't know how good Elisa is with us. You don't know that she sits with Michael when he has nightmares. Or that she taught Sophie how to braid her hair like Mommy used to. Or that she helped me write a letter to Mommy that I keep under my pillow, Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. You don't know that Daddy smiles when he watches Elisa play with us, Sophie added, or that he bought her favorite cookies at the store even though he pretends he doesn't notice things like that. Marcus went very still. And you don't know, Michael said in his quiet, serious voice, that Elisa told us it's okay to miss Mommy forever, but that doesn't mean we can't love other people too. Victoria stared at the three children standing together like a small army, defending their family, defending me. When she spoke again, her voice was different, less certain, more confused. I want what's best for you. You're my sister's children. Then trust us to know what that is, Emma said simply. Victoria looked around the hallway one more time. At Marcus, who was watching his children with obvious pride. At me, standing there in my simple clothes, with tears on my cheeks. At 3 6-year-olds who had just eloquently defended their right to happiness. I need to think about this, she said finally. After she left, the house felt different, lighter, somehow. The children went back to their playroom, chattering excitedly about how they'd won against Aunt Victoria. But Marcus and I stood in the hallway, the weight of everything that had been said settling between us. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For defending my family. For caring about them the way you do. Mr. Ashford. Marcus, he said, I think after everything we've been through, you can call me Marcus. Marcus. His name felt different on my tongue. More personal. More real. Elisa. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and warm. What my children said about me. Watching you with them. About the cookies. My heart was beating so fast. I was sure he could hear it. They notice everything, I said softly. Apparently, he was close enough now that I could see the flecks of blue in his gray eye. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Before I could answer, Sophie's voice echoed from the playroom. Elisa, Daddy, come see what we built. The moment broke, but something had shifted between us. As we walked back to the children together, I felt Marcus's hand brush against mine, just for a second, but long enough to send warmth shooting through my entire body. That night, after the children were asleep, I found Marcus in the kitchen, making coffee. He'd changed out of his work clothes into jeans and a sweater, and he looked younger somehow, more human. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, handing me a mug. Too much thinking. We sat at the kitchen island, in comfortable silence, listening to the wind rattle the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall. Victoria isn't wrong about one thing, Marcus said eventually. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? You are temporary. This job, this arrangement, it was never meant to be permanent. I stared into my coffee cup, trying to hide the pain I knew was written all across my face. Of course he was right. I was the help. This wasn't my family, no matter how much it felt like it. I know, I said quietly. The thing is, he continued, and there was something different in his voice now. I don't want it to be temporary anymore. I looked up sharply. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I don't understand. Elisa, in 6 weeks, you've given my children something I couldn't give them in 2 years. You've given them back their childhood, their laughter, their hope. He paused. You've given me back my children. You never lost them. You just got lost for a while. Maybe. But you found us, all of us. The kitchen felt suddenly small, charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm outside. What are you saying? He set down his coffee cup and turned to face me fully. I'm saying that somewhere between watching you turn my children's tantrums into games and seeing you stand up to Victoria like a lioness protecting her cubs, I realized something. What? I'm in love with you. The words hit me like lightning. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. I know it's complicated, he continued quickly. I know you work for me. I know there's a power imbalance. I know, Marcus. What? I love you too. His eyes widened. You do. I love watching you read bedtime stories, with different voices for each character. I love how you learned to make Mickey Mouse pancakes, because Sophie mentioned she saw them on TV. I love how patient you are, when Michael needs extra time to find his words. I took a shaky breath. I love how you've become the father these children always needed you to be. He stood up slowly, moving around the island until he was standing in front of me. When he reached out to touch my face, his hands were trembling. Elisa, yes? I have no idea how to do this, how to be in love with someone again, how to risk my heart when losing Catherine nearly destroyed me. You don't have to know how, I said, leaning into his touch. We'll figure it out together. When he kissed me, it was soft and careful, and full of promise. It tasted like coffee, and hope, and the beginning of something beautiful. We were so lost in each other that we didn't hear the soft footsteps on the kitchen tile until Sophie's voice cut through the silence. Are you kissing Elisa, Daddy? We sprang apart to find 3 children standing in the doorway, in their pajamas, staring at us, with expressions ranging from confusion to delight. I Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking more flustered than I'd ever seen him. We were just, are you going to marry her? Emma asked with characteristic directness. Emma, Marcus's face was bright red now. Well, are you? Sophie pressed. Because that would be really cool. Can we have a wedding here? Emma was getting excited now, with flowers and cake and everything. Will you still be our nanny if you marry Daddy? Michael asked seriously. Or will you be our new mom? The questions stopped. Everyone cold. The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of snow tapping against the windows. I knelt down so I was at Michael's eye level. Sweetheart, no one could ever replace your mommy. She will always be your mom, and she will always love you. I know, he said quietly. But could you love us too? Like an extra mom? My throat closed up completely. I looked at these 3 beautiful children, who had been through so much, who had fought so hard against letting anyone into their hearts, and who were now asking me to stay forever. I already do love you, I whispered. All of you. So much it scares me sometimes. Good, Emma said decisively. Then you have to marry Daddy. It's not that simple, Marcus started. Why not? Sophie interrupted. You love Elisa. Elisa loves you. We love Elisa. And she loves us. That sounds simple to me. Marcus looked at me helplessly, and I laughed despite the tears streaming down my face. You know what, I said? Maybe it is that simple. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, I walked down the aisle in the garden of the Biltmore estate. Emma was my maid of honor. Sophie was the flower girl. And Michael was the ring bearer. They'd insisted on being part of the wedding, and watching them beam with pride as they took their roles seriously was better than any fairy tale ending I could have imagined. Marcus waited for me at the altar. They'd set up overlooking the ocean, handsome, in his black tuxedo, but looking nervous as a teenager. When I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, You sure about this? No takebacks. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. As we exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, I thought about the desperate woman who'd walked through these gates 8 months ago, willing to do anything for a job. I'd thought I was just trying to survive. Instead, I'd found my home. You may kiss the bride, the minister said. And as Marcus pulled me into his arms, I heard 3 little voices cheering louder than all the adults combined. That night, after the reception, after the last guest had gone home, after the children had finally fallen asleep, still wearing their wedding clothes, Marcus and I stood on the balcony of our bedroom, looking out at the estate that was now truly our home. Any regret? He asked, his arms wrapped around me from behind. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The desperation, the fear, the moments when I'd wanted to, the gradual building of trust, the slow healing of hearts that had been broken, the discovery that love could grow in the spaces between grief. Just one, I turned in his arms, smiling up at the man who'd given me everything I'd never dared to dream of. Love, family, a place where I belonged. I regret that it took 15 other nannies quitting before I got the chance to find you. He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the cool night air. Best hiring decision I ever made. From somewhere in the house came the sound of small feet running across hardwood floors, followed by giggling and shushing. I think our children are out of bed, I said. Our children, Marcus repeated softly. like he was testing how the words felt. I like the sound of that. Me too. We found all three of them in Emma's room, supposedly asleep, but clearly having been talking. Emma's eyes were squeezed shut in fake sleep. Sophie was grinning under her blanket, and Michael was peeking at us with one eye. Nice try, guys, I said, but you're terrible at pretending to be asleep. They all sat up, giggling. Are you really our mom now? Sophie asked. I sat on the edge of Emma's bed, and Marcus sat beside me. Three children immediately climbed into our laps like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm your Elisa, I said carefully, just like I've always been. But now I'm also your dad's wife, which means I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Good, Emma said firmly. Because we've decided we like you. You've decided? We took a vote, Sophie explained seriously. It was unanimous. Unanimous? It means we all agreed, Michael said quietly. Elisa can stay forever. As Marcus and I tucked three children into their beds. Our children now. I marveled at how much had changed. This house that had once felt like a beautiful prison was now filled with laughter and love, and the sound of a family learning how to be whole again. Later, as Marcus and I lay in bed, listening to the ocean waves crash against the shore, he traced patterns on my arm in the darkness. Elise, I need to tell you something. I turned to face him, suddenly worried. What? That first day, when I hired you. I almost didn't. You were so different from what I thought I was looking for. No experience, no credentials, nothing that made sense on paper. What changed your mind? When I asked you what made you special, and you said you didn't know if you were special, but you knew what it felt like to lose someone who was your whole world. He pulled me closer. That's when I knew you might be the only person who could understand my children. And now I know you didn't just understand them. You saved them. You saved all of us. I kissed him softly, tasting the salt air on his lips. We saved each other. A year later, as I watched Emma help Sophie with her homework while Michael read a story to his baby sister. Yes, baby sister, because apparently the Ashford family wasn't done growing. I thought about that first desperate night, when I'd applied for a job I was completely unqualified for. I'd been wrong about so many things. This wasn't just a job that no nanny could survive. This was a family that no one had bothered to understand. Children who weren't impossible. They were just hurting. A father who wasn't cold. He was scared. And I wasn't just some girl from Queens who got lucky. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Marcus found me in the kitchen that evening, standing at the window watching our children play in the garden where we'd been married. He wrapped his arms around me, and I leaned back against his chest, feeling completely perfectly home. Penny for your thoughts, he murmured against my ear. Just thinking about how strange life is, how the worst moments can lead to the best ones. Having second thoughts about marrying into this chaos. I laughed, watching Emma teach the baby to clap while Sophie and Michael made funny faces to make her giggle. Never, I said. This chaos is exactly where I belong. Good, he said, turning me around to face him. Because I love you, Elisa Ashford. And I have no intention of letting you survive this job. I'm planning to keep you forever. As he kissed me in the kitchen of our home, surrounded by the sounds of our children's laughter, I thought about that desperate woman who'd walked through these gates 18 months ago. She'd thought she was just taking a job. She had no idea she was coming home.